títulos deles aqui no nosso.
Boa tarde.
Sei que já estão.
Olá.
Olá. Tudo bem?
Tudo bem?
Vamos a começar. Eu já posso? Ok.
Quer dizer, eu posso ligar a minha câmera ou começas tu e depois eu ligo?
Não, depois eu ligo. Já estamos a ser transmitidos online? Já estamos a ser transmitidos online. Então, é assim, eu fazia a introdução em inglês e depois apresentava o professor Orfeu e o professor João, que eu ainda não estou a ver conectado, e nessa altura, então, deixava-vos à vontade para dialogarem, está bem?
Bem.
Portanto, eu vou começar agora formalmente em inglês e a seguir já vos apresento. Okay? Já está a ser transmitido? Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to the day 2 of the second international meeting of What If World History, which happens during the Days of Alternative History, Wine Punk and Friends at Casa Comum at University of Porto. Yesterday, we had the first invited lecturers face-to-face session where arts met economics in a very interesting dialogue where they explore how alternative history could be used as a tool to predict scenarios, to even reorganize our collective and individual memory and uncover forgotten details of history that present an added value to the way we see ourselves and the world. We also have the first two roundtables of oral presentations. During those, 4 works were presented. We had a work based on how history of science and alternative scenarios can be used to predict data and significance for policymakers, namely regarding climate change or pandemics, as you would use the past to predict this type of scenarios in the future. And also how the history of medicine would be greatly different if you develop anesthesia and the discipline of anesthesiology, I'm sorry, from the patient's perspective. On the second roundtable, we had the role of women in punk music, such as, for example, Patti Smith, and how the world and the world of music in particular would be different if there hadn't been women in the punk music. This was contrasted with the fact that STEM could be very different for women and girls around the world if some details of the role of women, such in the development of the web, were better known. So it was explored how technology would change in different alternative history scenarios through better communication of the role of those who actually are the technology makers. Today, we are about to start another invited lecturers face-to-face session. We had yesterday, as I already said, arts and economics, and today we have physics and communication science. It is my great pleasure to present Professor Orfeu Bertolami from the Faculty of Sciences of the University of Porto and Professor João Carlos Correia from the Faculty of Arts and Letters of the University of Beira Interior. And now it's up to you, and we all will enjoy. Thank you.
Well, are you seeing me?
Yes, and that's a magnificent view from
Well, as you
outer
can see,
space.
I'm an International Space Station, direct in contact with you. So, but I cannot see my colleague. So probably it's easier to connect from the International Space Station than from elsewhere. So shall we wait a bit, or what? Anna, what would you like me to do? Shall we start? Or
Well, maybe wait 1 minute or two.
sure, no problem.
We yesterday, and it's usually in this type of virtual meetings, there was some technical problems. We are trying to see if that is the case right now. But you can use the time to talk about that magnificent scenario you have on your back and the experience of outer space.
Well, I mean, I was assigned the task to talk about what if from the point of view of physics, and get into, well, arts and social science, and I hope I'll be able to cover all that ground. It's not at all easy. I will do it, as you see, through 3 examples, starting with physics, then I will jump into literature, and then I will jump into the matters that have been apparently the subject of the discussion yesterday on the problem of climate change, and in a sense also its connection with the pandemics. So 3 what ifs from 3 different points of view. So that's, of course, for me, it's a great privilege to address to you in this platform. And I'm looking forward to have an entertaining dialogue with my colleague, as well as with people from the public. This is a privileged science fiction method, because we can talk with everyone in theory, from every part of the planet. So it's very, very interesting and exciting from my point of view.
So we are waiting for see if the problem can be solved. I have the slight suspicious that we started the session 10 minutes earlier. Indeed, it is supposed to be at 3 o'clock, and maybe that's so.
Oh, okay. So yes,
we will now continue to talk and see if things will go.
I mean, as I have been, in fact, lecturing using the system we are using today. Now I can see João Carlos, so he's...
I already can see him too.
Yes.
Welcome, Professor João. So now, for real, you can...
well, I mean, I'm watching it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, I was trying to enter for several times, but I didn't find you.
But now you did. Well, now we'll leave you two, and we'll be enjoying
Anna,
the rest of audience your talk.
Anna,
okay? Yes.
We were supposed to start at 3. Should we wait, or we start?
Yes. If I may suggest, you can speak a bit about yourselves, because we are keeping it from the point of view of the moderator, which is my person, informal. But if people are already online, they can learn a little bit about your background, and then at 3 o'clock you start the lecture itself, if you agree, of course.
I do agree, and I would suggest, if I'm allowed, to invite my colleague João Carlos Correia to introduce himself, and then I would do it afterwards, please.
Okay, thank you for giving me that priority. Well, my name is João Correia. I'm a professor at the University of Beira Interior in Covilhã, near from Serra da Estrela. I'm professor of media and cultural studies, but I have a lot of interests in subjects such as alternative narratives and alternative history, and also a preoccupation with that is a main concern of my current work on time and acceleration of times. Is because of that I'm feeling more or less in tune with the conference. I hope not to be very far from the core of our of our of, of our concerns. Uh, I teach I teach mainly the the connections between communication and society, and I give I highlight the problem of time and acceleration as a main concern of our days. And I also give classes of culture. And in culture, I study culture as the interiorization, as the um, self repression of the self by the need of be more productive, more and to fight against against nature and to conquer walls. So those kinds of problems, I think, will be interesting to discuss during our lectures. I made all my these problems were already present in my PhD that I made in Beira Interior, and also particularly in my PhD, and now in my present work. I'm also an a person very interested in science fiction, speculative theories, and in what utopias I create a conference on the concept of utopias, and I look to utopias as a kind of big what if, and probably that will be the main concern of my I will not call it a lecture of my talk, of the small talk that I will have with you.
All right. So thank you very much. So I'm a professor of physics. I've been doing that for, well, since my youth. So it's almost 45 years, actually 46 years of physics. I lecture, I teach. I started teaching physics when I was 17 in a high school. So I could say that I'm a freak of physics, and indeed I love it, and I'm a freak of it. Okay. Nevertheless, I have a huge appetite for reading, and I have a great interest in social sciences and in literature in particular. And you see throughout my lecture an example of the things that I'm interested in literature, because I'll present to you a book that I have written and is being produced as we speak. It's about political fiction. So it's a very concrete example of what if. But I should add that as a physicist, I'm an expert in what if physics, because we have some theories in the beginning of 21st century that work very, very well indeed. However, they do not explain all we would like to. Therefore, we are bound to speculate about extensions, generalizations, and further work on these theories that would allow us to have a more encompassing view of the universe and the things that take place in it. So in this sense, I could say that I'm an expert on what if physics. Later on, we'll talk about the problems we face in our world, and I will touch about the Anthropocene and its implications, and I will therefore have to consider necessarily alternative futures, because otherwise we will be in serious trouble. Not myself. I won't be there to hope to face it, but the next generations will find that it will be increasingly difficult to survive in the world on which its physical, biological, geophysical, and geochemical parameters have been changed so considerably. So, but that put us basically in the subject of my lecture or my talk, and but I think well, we will have plenty of room to discuss given these broad guidelines that we have set to ourselves. So I think I'll be more than keen to carry on a discussion along these lines.
Okay, so let's begin now. You have begun by presentation. You are going to begin with the lecture.
Okay, so can I do it? Well, okay, so I have some slides, and I swear to you that when I put them, start preparing them yesterday evening, there were just a few of them. Okay, but as I start putting them together, they have grown in number, and but we'll go through that very quickly. So I don't know if can you see the screen already?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Joan. I will start because the title say from physics to art. So I think it makes sense to start with physics, right? Okay, so let me do that. The crucial need for an alternative future. What if? Well, my starting point is a talk I gave long ago, which called What If? What if general relativity is not the theory? So, as I said, it's a well-established theory of physics, explains how the universe works, but it doesn't explain everything. And we are terribly unsatisfied with that. I have to tell you that physicists are people that seriously need a psychiatric treatment. They have very sophisticated theories, they have lots of data, but they're never happy with it. They're always unhappy, okay? So of course, if you want to read that, I suggest you take a look at the paper. It has been published long ago, but it contains the reasons why to go forward, okay? So, and allow me in 2 minutes to explain what a physicist would do. To first would gather, well, the starting point. The starting point is the Einstein equation is rusty, okay? So you see it's rusty and therefore it has lots of problems, okay? Well, you will start collecting what you know. What you know are symmetries, are bounds, are numbers that have to be satisfied. So whatever theory you put forward, you have to satisfy these constraints. It doesn't matter, but it's a long list of them. That's what you have to take care of. Afterwards, you have to start connecting things. Long ago, I started collecting these things. And in a talk that I gave in Budapest in 2012, I call it Tales of Mystery and Imagination. It is the title of a book of Edgar Allan Poe, as you know. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of things that are unknown, dark energy, dark matter. And you see, when I put this list, it was all green. It was all green because we have very little evidence of that. But now everything that you see in red has already been established, okay? We didn't have any evidence of gravitational waves. We have detected gravitational waves. We have no evidence about black holes. We have seen black holes. So the knowledge is evolving and very quickly. So afterwards, you start, again, connecting pieces. Those principles with that phenomenology that you want to explain. And eventually, you come up with the idea that physics should be simpler at high energy, and then you put forward a theory, okay? An example of a theory. It doesn't matter what I'm telling you. Just tell you that this is a gravity theory. It's more general than general relativity. It explains lots of those phenomenological issues. It satisfies all those bounds, but it's richer than general relativity, and therefore potentially, it could replace general relativity if we did manage to show that this is really the theory in opposition to general relativity. How do you do that? Collecting data, okay? So that's the state of the art. You have to collect data and you have to, so this is a typical example of what if physics. You have an alternative theory to what is already established. You can say, well, how do I know that this is better and or worse? Well, this theory is more complicated than general relativity. If they both explain the same facts. General relativity is preferable because it's a simpler theory. But well, just telling you that there is an example of a theory, and you put forward this theory more than a decade, well, almost 2 decades ago. Another example. You generalize quantum mechanics. If you generalize quantum mechanics, well, it turns out that you have to generalize, for instance, Newton's law. You have to generalize the Newton's constant and things like that. It's another example of what if physics, okay? So I think of course, do not look to the equations, just take a look at that's the way physicists reason. They think with numbers and equations and okay, so that's my first example of what if. My second example is, well, and then you propose experiments, of course. You have missions, you propose space missions to test it, okay, 2 examples. Okay, so let me go. What about if I would put forward a what if from a different kind? What about if I would tell you that the history has taken place in a different way? This is a well-known issue, right? If Napoleon was a taller man, would history be different? If the French Revolution would take place earlier, how would be the world? And things like that. So this example is a book that I wrote many years ago, and it's being, as I said, under production. It's a University of Porto Press. It will be available possibly next week. It's being produced as I have mentioned, and put together the situation on which we have at the beginning of, well, in the 1933 in Central Europe, on which Hitler took power. And I have assumed that 2 important scientists, Albert Einstein and Lisa Meitner, who were captive of the Nazis, and they were put to work on nuclear weapons. Okay? So what happens? Well, that's the subject of the book. And you say, well, this is impossible. This is too crazy. Well, it's too crazy, but this is the book. Okay, so this is what the book is about. This is not new to me because long ago, 20 years ago, I wrote a play called Achamentos, on which humankind found itself in several parts of the solar system because Earth has already gone into a catastrophic situation due to the collision of an asteroid. So this subject, this way of thinking is not new to me. So this is another example of what if. If you do change some bits of the history, what would happen? What would be the outcome? Well, but of course, we nowadays face the situation, well, if we do change conditions at the present, we may have some different outcome. And my motto, as well as the motto of João Carlos Correia, as far as I could understand, is precisely the absolute necessity to change the future, because this will have serious implications for humankind as a whole. So how could you take care of that? Well, let me mention some papers I have been writing. Two of them concerns utopia. Okay, I wrote this paper, Utopic Tension, long ago, and a couple of years ago I wrote this paper, Utopia, Utopian and Scientific. So changing the conditions of our life is certainly one of my preoccupations. Well, I'll also reflect on that in a recent lecture I gave at 100 years of Faculty of Letras of University of Porto, a reflection of a physicist on the cultural ocean of our time. I'm not going into the title. You see, a physicist could get into social science. It would be sort of a Trojan horse type of trick. But of course, a physicist would never trick sophisticated people as social scientists. So I said, well, when you look at zebra, you know that's me, okay? So you may not think that I'm a Trojan horse. Well, I discussed several things in these lectures. I start being very kind. I throwing sweets and fruits to the audience. And then when I discussed our time, I had to be a bit more aggressive, okay? Because we live in my opinion, an age of uncertainty, and in this time has serious implications for the future of humankind. So I'm not going into the issue, but whatever is our discussion, we always have something called the field of meaning. And you have some objective reality and subjective reality. They are in continuous interaction with itself. And but the interesting point of this field of discussion is the possibilities. This has to do with the limits of the discourse itself, as it's the limits of our imagination. And that's the whole point of science fiction. So the fields of possibility, as I say, it is related with our creativity and our imagination. And in every subject, you can ask questions that are beyond our knowledge. For instance, you can ask, what's inside the event horizon of a black hole? It's a type of thing that looks out of the box, but it's this is inside the speech you are carrying out. What's beyond the event horizon of our universe? Is our universe a web of universes, or is just a single universe? Or for instance, you can ask in mathematics, the famous continuous hypothesis. If you take the infinite of real numbers, of the natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on, it's an infinite number. If you take a power of that, can you obtain a denser infinite, like the infinite of real numbers? That's a hypothesis. It has been put forward by cantors in the early 20th century, and then it was found out that this is an answer without any possibility of finding an ambiguous answer. all answers are possible. And this is something that has been pointed out by this famous Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So this is beyond the discourse of mathematics. You have to postulate another mathematics in order to answer this type of question. This is beyond the discourse itself. Of course, the limits are always the imagination. Fractality, for instance, you can build complex figures like those ones shown here. For instance, take a triangle, and in every side of the triangle, put another triangle, and then you create more and more complex structures. For instance, you can very easily build a very complex word. This is called a Drastic Effect after this cocoa blend that was had this theme that appeared in Netherlands in the early 20th century. You see the picture of this can of cocoa, but you see in that picture there is already a picture of the design of the can. And inside that picture, you see another picture, and so on, and so on, and so on. This goes on for the infinity. It's something like you see here, an image being reflected by another image, which is reflected by the other image, and so on, and so on. You can say, this is very modern, but not quite, because it was, in fact, invented by Giotto. If you take the famous Stepanevsky triptych, you see at its very center, there is a saint which has the triptych itself. And inside the triptych, there is that saint that has the triptych, and so on, and so on, and so on. You can create a very complex word out of this rule of replicating the same structure several times. Of course, you can complexify your speech. You can, well, take some examples in literature. It can be as complex as you wish. You can have alternative times. I think it will be the subject of João. You can think of the time as a straight line. You can think of the line as circular. You can think the time which flows differently in different parts of the universe. You can have many different types of universe. You can have many types of spaces. Look at Escher's drawings. You see the formations of the space here and there, and you see a completely illogical type of perspective. You can also read impossible cities in this famous book of Italo Calvino called the Invisible Cities, and so on and so on, okay? So this is to say that there are many ways of complexifying and build alternative words. Well, let me go. You could ask very straightforward questions. How would you like the university would be in the future? So I wrote a paper about it, just to say that I can be very abstract, but I can be very concrete. So a list of things that I would like to see in a university in 2030. But I can ask other things. For instance, I gave this TEDx talk, whose title was, "What If?" And the question was, what if we have a problem, call it climate change, and you have nowadays no instruments to tackle that? So that was one of my main concerns nowadays. We may run into a very serious trouble concerning the change of the climate, but you have no instruments to tackle that. In fact, we are in the Anthropocene, a new era in the history of the planet, on which the man is the main ruler of the features of the planet. And it brings a host of problems, okay? So this is a partial list. Climate change is just one of them. But we are destroying species at an incredible rate. We are urbanizing the planet. We are degrading the soil, the water, the quality of life. So, and how to deal with that? So we will feel powerless about it. Well, this is a this is the fruit of the discussion with the people that are expert on that. Will Stefan, it's an expert on the weather. And I have been tackling the problem scientifically, but my main concern is to find the instruments, okay? for a while, I thought, well, the future will bring itself solutions like it bring in the past. We did manage to have agreement between superpowers not to use nuclear weapons. We have agreement not to produce substances that destroy the ozone layer. We had the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol, in order to curtail the production of the dioxide of carbon. But we failed. And I thought, but well, maybe in the future there will be an agreement between all the nations so that we can preserve the environments and save the main ecosystems of the planet. I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think this is going to happen. So I put myself to think about alternatives. And one of these alternatives we recently came up to was a decentralized management of the system on which every individual, every group of people, every country, every city, every community can sign this digital contract, would get some bitcoins from this central digital system that would allow you to restore ecosystem locally. Once you a contributor, you get money. If you destroy, you have to give money. And the way of doing this is a new Bitcoin that you have proposed. So this is just to tell you that it's an idea to show how desperate we are to save ecosystems in our planet these days. And well, we are concerned with the pandemics. The pandemics, many people and myself think this is exactly what you're going to face in the near future. We will have lockdowns due to very serious bursts of high temperature. We have to close our cities. We will have to have long periods of inactivity, productive inactivity due to climate change. And so what you're facing nowadays with pandemics is a sort of a dressing rehearsal from the things that's going to happen in the future. So you say, well, this is all hopeless, okay? But I do not think so. I do not give up, okay? And I bring this example and I close down with this example. It's this project called the Great Green Wall. This is the idea of building a green wall to protect the tropical forests of Africa from the advancement of the Sahara Desert. So it would cut horizontally the whole Africa. And indeed, it sounds totally utopical. But if you take a look, this is how it looks like. It has already 8,000 kilometers of extension and 5 kilometers of width. And it's being involved in more than a dozen countries, among them the poorest of the planet. So if the poorest countries of the planet can manage to build an incredible work like that, so why we in the presumably more advanced part of the planet cannot come up with something at this scale? So if you look Earth from space, and if you focus on Africa, you can see already the Great Green Wall there. So it's an example of how humankind can get together and reshape our future and turn a what if into indeed we can save ourselves from our worst mistakes. So I'll stop here for a while. Okay, please, João.
I was thinking in the lot of subjects during your talk. Well, I would like to say that there are some main ideas that I would like to stress, to highlight in the beginning of my talk. The first one is that the weight of cultural determinism, of social determinism, is almost so heavy as natural, biological, physical, chemical determinism. We have the idea that natural determinism is much more stronger. Well, I think that we must also look at culture and society as a very determinist web of multiple ties carried on by the human species. And without, without it, that human species probably will not be the same as it is. By the other side, creativity in science is almost so important. Is almost no. Is so important as in arts and culture, because knowledge is always a what if. Um Knowledge begins with knowledge. The human adventure of knowledge always begins with what if. We put an hypothesis. The only limits for our what ifs are reached by what someone calls eidetic variations. We can change a thing, and we must ask if those changes changed that thing in a so different way that the thing himself lost his essence. For instance, a kingdom without a king. Would it be still a kingdom? A pen that didn't write would be still a pen, or a computer that not process data would still be a computer, or a river with no water would be still a river. What if have some limits? But however, those limits are found not by not by the affirmation, the permanent affirmation of what is, but also the multiple variations of one particular thing can be. That's to say, the essence of something is achieved by its variations and by its alternatives. It's because of that I love natural scientists, because they made a lot of eidetic variations, trying to find the most elegant and the most suitable to explain the reality of the world. But culture also is prejudices on the existence of two cultures that cannot speak one with another, sometimes forget that civilization and culture are an attempt to deny the multiplicity of the many alternatives and possibilities that happens in our history, during our history. The problem of alternatives of what if is problematic because it is against is entropy, against the need of order. And the very idea of looking an explanation is a civilization or culture, an attempt to deny the multiplicity of many alternatives and possibilities that became entropic dangers. What if is an expression that implies a culture dichotomy between the principle of reality and the principle of pleasure, for instance, that also implies the intervention of imagination. The principle of reality, as we know all, is culturally connected with what really happened. Well, but what really happened is not so self-evident as we think. What if is the mobilization of imagery and open possibilities that cannot be realized or carried on uh, because of culture and civilization aren't compatible with the full concretization of desires, passions, instincts are not fully compatible with human happiness. Uh, the idea of a principle of pleasure against a principle of reality is strongly connected with culture, narrative, and time. With culture, well, for most of persons that think in a reality principle, that principle will be the self-interiorization of norms and values that preserve civilization, production, technological gains, technological success in the conquer of the surrounding world, and in the subjugation of an hostile environment. Most of the dystopian believe in the generalization of an kind of autonomous scientific rationality that is boosted by a dominant impulse towards the nature domination. That's particularly clear with Renaissance, with Enlightenment, and with positivist theories that postulated reason and as an objective historical force to establish progress and happiness in the world. The new rationality in emerging and modernity is a rationality that in some way can be seen as projecting the replacement of old social ties, feelings, customs, and beliefs. And by a kind of self-concealment of ourselves. The reason of modernization would be an historical need that would prepare the humankind for its definitive triumph against nature. And in the end, the human communities will be much more well succeeded if they deny entropy and if they interiorize lots of norms and values that repressing instincts allow the humankind to conquer nature. Social sciences became conceived as accordingly to a pure scientific conduct, to a truly scientific, to a truly positivistic conduct, and through a certain type of planning to direct the society, taking into account the relation of forces existed, really existing in the real society. The subordination of imagination to observation is completely advocated, is completely supported. And that in that kind of way of seeing things, uh, all the alternatives to our history of human presence in nature is the permanent deny of the alternatives that points to any other way. Capitalist economy, modern bureaucracy, technical progress, disciplinary mechanisms assume the proportions of a process of destruction of meaning. The reason is totally pragmatic and centered in self-preservation. The reason is increasingly related to the efficiency criteria, thanks to which the individual adapts to society and progress in almost to totalitarian way. The first attempts of domination of nature are connected of the development of the reifying process that have its diabolic heyday in the pathological forms of Holocaust and Gulag. The instrumental became of reason was already written in the Ulysses narrative. The triumph of humankind is the price of renunciation, self-concealment, the rupture of communication between man and nature, and introversion of sacrifice or sacrifice introversion. Narrative is really connected with this idea of the principle of reality. Since Homer Odyssey, the individual human action is the triumph of men against natural dangers, with the help of the repression of their own instincts. And during the Enlightenment, Robinson Crusoe from Defoe uh, is the protagonist, is the new Ulysses that brings civilization to the obscurity of dark age of savage nature. Uh, the new rhythms of this planet society for many thinkers, writers, destroyed the artisanal form of interaction with between men and between men and nature. Narratives became increasingly rare because they um, they are not enough speed and uh, not enough explicative to solve problems. The community between life and work in pre-industrial times was supported by a particular organization of work. When common memory is lost, when artisanal work ends, narrative forms are replaced by speedness and the quick uh, the quick information and the quick knowledge in order to help the productivist conquer of the world became became predominant. All globalization periods are associated with the ability to conquer space in less time, nautical art and caravels, railways and trains, automobiles, and finally the internet. Uh, to be realistic, that is, to accept the reality principle, to be a well adapted a good citizen, well civilized, cult, and well adapted to civilization, is to accept efficacy and capacity of solve problems. All the what if are in a some way escape from the principle of reality and are the search for free times that are not planned according that self-coercion and nature exploitation. Uh, Against the idea of reality principle, we have the pleasure principle that includes other way of thinking, other what ifs. When we think in Orwell and in 1984 or in Brave New World, we are talking in about what ifs that most of them think in a productivist and industrialized society where the status are well determined at as an a priori. The Brave New World works as the St. John apocalypse. After the apocalypse, after the bad days, we will have the redemption, and the redemption is a new form of what if. All the apocalyptics, such as Orwell in 1984, or such Huxley in Brave New World, are apocalyptics looking for a redemption for society. In the end of times, Wilson will not be jailed and tortured by the Big Brother, and probably the the new brave society will be less rigid. The project of a new brave society is a what if that must be conceived considering time. And it should be based on the constitution of a principle of non-repressive performance, is what I think. I look for a non-repressive performance. Must we be productive? Of course, but we must be productive with non-repressive performance. This means that there are useless repressions that mutilates and cause displeasure that should be minimized. And most of that repression that causes displeasure are connected with time. The wealth produced today would make possible to exempt many people from intense working hours, and the remaining time could be devoted to possible ways of imagining new what ifs, realizing pleasure, cultivation of mental faculties, creative leisure, and free times. I like the expression free times because we say tempos livres, free times, at times that are calculated as into a schedule that is divided in a rigid way between labor time and free times. Well, that's division, that's dichotomy. For me, it's not always necessary. And what if we have enough devices and we have good common sense to make not a strictly division between free times and labor, but to build a society when labor are a natural as some natural continuity with the so-called free times and vice versa. That's my what if, very centered in the question of time and acceleration, and that's I would like to discuss with you.
Thank you. I think um, uh, if I understand what you've been telling us is that well, there are conflicting forces in action when you talk about culture and about the instincts of human beings. Human beings are, are, are propelled to fulfill their needs, to fulfill their pleasures. And we know that this can be achieved just partially because there are constraints of all types and even cultural ones. Recently, there was a culture that said, well, pleasure is forbidden by reasons, etc., etc., etc. But I understand that this is a type of conflict that can be scaled up, and you see this conflict in a society as a whole. But I think when you propose your what if, I would say, well, I would be more inclined to consider the following conflict: the conflict between cooperation and not cooperation.
Yeah.
We know that we've been wired throughout the evolution to survive, and survival under the conditions that were set up by the evolution, where, well, we have to live in small groups, we have to conquer nature in order to survive, and our ability to cooperate was very much restricted to a group of a limited number of people around us, a small community, which allow us to survive in a very hostile world. Of course, this is conflicting with the fact that nowadays, in the Anthropocene, we need a much wider cooperation. We've seen in the last few years when a country like USA, I do not want to cooperate. So, and this collapses makes all the agreements between nations to collapse, because if one nation says, I'm not going to cooperate, all the others will find themselves in the right of saying the same. So, to me, the issue would be how to solve this conflict. Cooperation against non-cooperation. And if we do manage to overcome this hurdle, I think we'll be able to achieve a future which is much better for every one of us. Actually, I believe this is the only viable one, okay? cooperation is the only viable way to change the harm that you have already caused to the environment and to ourselves. The issue is not the planet itself. Earth will survive. Earth will survive. Whatever happens, Earth will survive. The issue is humankind.
Yeah.
Humankind is viable in the planet that's so altered by our own action. So to me, the what if, I read your what if, is that if we slow down our society, if we slow down, let's say, the productive process, if we slow down consumption, if we slow down the harm that we are doing to the environment, we will be in better shape. But it requires cooperation, and that, to my mind, the issue is how to achieve that. Yeah. And well, I made a very modest proposal, and I think the pandemics somehow show us that it's not through widespread cooperation that you get there. Every small community will have to face the conditions with its own means, and you do have to acquire the knowledge, the skills to be resilient. And this will have to be done first on a local scale, and then it can be generalized if there is cooperation. But I think small communities will play a very important role. And that's why, well, I propose this digital contract as a way of, if you want to slow down a bit history, okay, if you want, okay?
We can't slow down without cooperation. I'm completely in agree with you because we have a lot of resources. The question is always the question of the surviving of humankind. I'm in agree with you. Earth will survive. The humankind could not survive, but Earth will not be the same because we have an Earth for us. The heart is the heart that we study is a social construct of the Homo faber and of the Homo sapiens. And the Homo faber was someone that changed heavily the earth and the nature and things. Well, the question is that what are we have now enough resources to slow down because there are intense problems. We are with our obsession with productivity and efficiency without thinking and the survival of good, decent and human conditions of life. But is a danger that, and is an existential danger for our humankind. But that slowdown needs cooperation. However, cooperation and self-preservation were always present in the history of the humankind. Anthropologists are always finding marks of both. I can think in the Neolithic revolution without cooperation.
Sure, but it's a cooperation on a much smaller scale, in a much smaller scale. The groups were much smaller, and that now what we need is a worldwide cooperation. Okay,
yes.
So I'm sorry, but there is a question here. Someone is asking the following question: what if gravitational waves have been detected a decade earlier? Would that have changed concerning our understanding of science and from a physicist communication point of view? Well, that's an interesting what if, I would say.
Oh, okay.
I think that would be interesting. However, I From my mind, it wouldn't change things significantly for the following reason. Theoretical physicists predict things sometimes many decades, and in this case, Einstein has predicted the existence of gravitational waves in 1915. Took then took almost 100 years to show them. If they were shown a decade earlier, it would be already a considerable span of time, 90 years, okay? So it would just confirm general relativity, but it wouldn't help us to solve the other problems that I have mentioned. So I think, well, it would be interesting to have the certainty that gravitational waves were very much in agreement with what general relativity has predicted. But meanwhile, there are many other problems, and that requires other theories of gravity, which of course they themselves have gravitational waves too, of course. So yes, it would be interesting, but I don't think it would make a significant change. Okay. So what about, there is another question. What about word history? And nowadays, the role of emotion in brain processes and neurology is becoming more prominent. How's that change the usual accepted role of reason for the historical processes? Well, well, so do you want to try that one? I have an idea about it, but would you like to try this one?
I would like to try when two. I like this one. What would have changed regarding the trust of general public in science from a physicist and
What I think I accounted. Yeah, that is more my subject.
That is also very, very interesting. And the problem of emotion is also very interesting, and the problem of reason also. Let's be as as fast as possible. From the communication point of view, the trust of general public in science has changed a lot. We have a problem of negationism and relativism that we must to face, and I'm not sure that all those ideas about post-truth that are now in nowadays discussion are important because they bring us a sense of uncertainty. We are in an age of uncertainty in face of our existential fears, and the pandemics is obviously an example. Why? I have a question to this question. That is, we are more than ever aware of the existence of existential threats to the humankind. And more than ever in the last decades, the trust in science has declined in last decades. Last numbers about trust in vaccination, public vaccination in Europe were very pessimist, and that's interesting, and they worry me. Other problem, the role of emotion and brain process and neurology is becoming more prominent. That's good and bad. There is a problem that is connected with fastness and slow down. There's a theory that thinks that we can divide the human thoughts in slow thought, or to think fast or to think slow. Well, some kinds of impulses and some kinds of media and way of knowledge that are ways of transmitting knowledge that are now very important, are changing our cognitive characteristics. Probably we are thinking faster than ever, and simultaneously we are thinking with a need of additional emotion more than ever. That's sometimes good and bad. I'm really afraid of a cold positivist way of looking to the society, but I also have the afraid of a populist, completely participative and almost anything else ways of looking at society and nature, of course. We have to.
Can I say something about it?
Yes, we have to change the rule of reason. The rule of reason is
Well,
not a supreme value by itself. There are moral, ethical, and existential problems that are that it must be in front of us when we use reason, looking for, and that's the need of major cooperation.
well, let me. I agree that the understanding that emotions are so important in neurology is a very important issue, and in fact is related with something that we are witnessing lately. Uh, Probably we have never seen in the history of humankind churches, mosques, and synagogues being closed on account of an epidemic. Okay, so now they are closed, and these people are asking scientists for their opinion about how safe it is for carrying out their religion. So that shows that what's going on is a major change. Scientists are being heard, and the science is being considered on a daily basis. So this is quite positive.
Yeah.
Furthermore, in what concerns the second question, the role of emotions, we now understand that emotions are an important part of our decisions, and I think any neurologist would confirm that emotions is also an important part of our intelligence, and it's crucial when you take decisions. And in what concerns historical decisions, I would say that we can never trust only reason. You have to trust humanism. You have to adjust your reason with human values, so that decisions you taking into account the suffering of people, the suffering of animals, the destruction of the environment. You have to stand your ethics, so that your reason is not simply operational. If you say to yourself, well, let's do some criminal act, okay? If you put just reason, you would plan a perfect crime, so that is executed in the most economical, in a flawless way. That's the use of reason, but that's the wrong use of reason, because it has no ethics. It has no basis on a human ground. So the issue is precisely coupling all together, and I think coupling reason with emotion is crucial for building a more encompassing ethics and a more general sense of what's really important in life and in living in society. So I think Anna has stepped in. It means that we have to close down. So please, Anna.
Hi. Hi to both of you, and it was really enjoyable and interesting, and I am really, really sorry to have to close down, even because, as you see, there were other questions that I really would love to see you, both of you, answering, but I and the people who put it and are watching, but we really have to
Yeah,
terminate the
seeing
session
a lot
because
of
there are other
good
sessions
questions.
following. Thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge, for everything you shared with us. And I hope will be the first of many other sessions in future events, okay?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
Thank you very
invitation.
much.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
and I have some time, so I'll hear a bit of the next talk, but then I have to go elsewhere. Okay, so but.
Okay. All these talks and yours as well are being uploaded to YouTube, and we have seen from the numbers that from yesterday to today, other people who are unable to watch it in live stream have been watched. So don't worry, you will have time to see other comments, to interact. This will be in public display. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm going. No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.